I'm back from the southern border, and yes, it's as big of a lawless mess as many are saying, including me. Give you a preview of what I witnessed while I was down there. Also ahead, another Fauci flip-flop is coming, this time on outdoor masking. Friends, it's time for Hold the Line. Welcome to Hold the Line. I'm Buck Sexton. So, first off, why aren't you seeing stories about what's happening at the U.S.-Mexico border? Ever think about that for a second? It's a pretty big deal, isn't it? Record numbers of people who are illegal migrants in custody. Record numbers of people who are crossing over into the country in violation of U.S. law. Drugs just flooding in from the cartels. Cartels making money hand over fist in the human trafficking and the narcotics trafficking. Our Border Patrol's overwhelmed. Our facilities can't actually process all the people. You have little kids, and I saw this. We'll talk more about this on Friday. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. We'll have a border special from me on the front lines this coming Friday, so be sure to tune in for that. But you have children that are walking hundreds of miles, sometimes over a month of just being transited through Mexico by cartel smugglers. It's awful what's going on. Why aren't you seeing more about it? Where is the government on this? Oh, that's right. We do have someone who's supposed to be handling this. It's the Vice President of the United States. Her name is Kamala Harris, and here's what she says about why she can't seem to even find her way down to the border.
Right now, Republicans are attacking you, saying you shouldn't be in New Hampshire talking about infrastructure. You should be in the southern border talking about immigration. How do you respond to them?
I'm not going to play political game.
Not going to play political games. I think it's a pretty straightforward question. When you are the so-called border czar, when you're the person who's in charge of fixing this problem, shouldn't you go and see for yourself what's happening? Shouldn't you meet with the people of Border Patrol, Immigration and Customs Enforcement? But no, this is a Democrat administration. They know the media is in their back pocket, and they know that no one will hold them to account. And so that's what they're just holding on to at this point. But we will show you this Friday a Hold the Line special, Buck at the Border. We'll be talking to you about that more then. Dr. Fauci, as you know, is someone who is, how do we put this exactly? Dr. Fauci is wrong a lot. And he has been wrong for the past year. He speaks out of both sides of his mouth. You can never trust this guy to actually tell you what's really true. It's always whatever's going to make the left and the Democrats happy with him. Somehow, he's never upset the left. You ever notice that? The lockdowners have never been mad at this guy, not once. He gives them exactly what they want all the time. Might as well be on the payroll at MSNBC. Well, people like me have been telling you for a long time that outdoor masking, there's some data on this. There have been some studies done, some pretty broad studies that look at real-world transmission of COVID-19, all right? And what they find is that it's very hard, close to impossible, to find any substantial transmission of COVID-19. Now, anything's possible in epidemiology. I mean, you know, someone could do this and then that, and then something flies through the air. And I mean, no one's saying that there's a 0% chance. But do we worry about a 1 in 10,000 or a 1 in 50,000 chance? Is that how we live our lives? I certainly hope not. But if you listen to Dr. Fauci, that is exactly how you would live your life. That's exactly what you'd be doing. People in major cities, I was just in Austin last weekend, masks outside on plenty of folks. In New York City right now, nice, pretty warm day here, masks on people. You got outdoor mask wearing by law in places like Michigan, and it's kind of the law in New York, other places as well. Where's the data on this? They don't have any data to support this. And in fact, Fauci himself has finally come out to say, we might have to adjust this a little bit. Here's what he told us.
Jim, I don't want to come out ahead of a CDC announcement, but as you hinted yourself just now a moment ago, that very soon, imminently, in the next few days, very likely, the CDC will be coming out with updating their guidelines of what people who are vaccinated can do, and even some who are not vaccinated. And certainly what one can do outdoors vis-a-vis masks is going to be one of those recommendations. So stay tuned, it's coming soon. You're going to be seeing people wanting to do things outdoors without masks, and it's common sense to know that the risk when you are outdoors, which we have been saying all along, is extremely low. And if you are vaccinated, it's even lower. So you're going to be hearing about those kinds of recommendations soon.
Notice how they always talk about this. It's very Orwellian, recommendations. But we all know the recommendations that the Fauciites give become law. That Democrat governors in particular say, okay, well, that's what they said. Now it's the law, executive order. So it's not just a recommendation, never has been. That's always been disingenuous from these little lab coat tyrants. But it's very low. It was very low before we had vaccines. Now you're going to tell vaccinated people that they even need to think about this outdoors? That's insane. And finally, the grip of these little tyrants is going to have to come off our faces outdoors. I'd like to see it come off at indoors too. But then there's another real world problem that they're dealing with here as we are trying to get to reopen. One of them is that we've been told by the corporate media and by the Democrat Party that the reason we've had such a tough time with COVID in this country is Donald Trump. You know that. That was the story. That was what they were pretending was behind all this. Now, that's absurd, but it is what they said, and they convinced a whole lot of people of that. And that our inability to defeat COVID, like, oh, I don't know, a tiny island nation with very few people per square mile in the middle of the Pacific Ocean like New Zealand that did hard, full-on lockdowns, which we never did, that why couldn't we be like them, the idiots would say. Well, there are a lot of countries, not just Western European countries, Brazil, there are countries all over the world that have had a terrible time with COVID, and one of them is India. What's interesting about the case of India is that right now they're saying that some hospitals are running out of oxygen. They have a lack of capacity to treat patients. They have mass grave situations because so many people are dying. In December of 2020, the Wall Street Journal reported on what Indian health experts were saying, health experts in the state of India, that it was consuming India until nearly everyone started wearing masks. The storyline was that masks saved India from COVID. That's what the health authorities in India were telling everybody. And here's a Wall Street Journal quote from December of 2020. India was reporting almost 100,000 COVID cases a day, with many predicting it would soon pass the U.S. in overall cases. Instead, its infections dropped. One of the main reasons Indian health officials say is the country encouraged and enforced almost universal acceptance of masks. Everybody masked up, they saved themselves. That was the storyline. The problem is right now India is in the worst place it's ever been with COVID. It has 300,000 cases a day, and it's dramatically undercounting its cases and deaths in the first place. It is the global hotspot for COVID. What happened? I thought in December they saved themselves with the mask wearing. Don't ask these questions. Listen to Fauci. Sure. One more thing. MIT put out a study. Now they're going to say this is just a theoretical study and that it's based on models, not based on real world data. That is true. But so are all of the studies that they point to justify masking in the first place. The mannequins with the spray mist. Oh, well, it stopped some of the mist. So that's the same as the virus. Therefore, this must work. Right, sure. MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, pretty serious place with serious people, did a study that said, we argue there really isn't much of a benefit to the 6-foot rule, especially when people are wearing masks. It really has no physical basis because the air a person is breathing while wearing a mask tends to rise and comes down elsewhere in the room. So you're more exposed to the average background than you are to a person at a distance. Yeah, that's 6 foot, 60 feet, 6 feet, doesn't matter. Basically, that's what they're saying. Science, hashtag science. I like to pay attention to it, even if the Fauciites just ignore it. All right, after the break, we'll have more on the CDC's coming update on its masking guidance and also school reopen, a whole bunch of stuff with the New York Post's Carol Markowicz. Stay with us. You ever thought about real estate investing before? Take me up on this recommendation. Visit doneforyoubuck.com right now. You can learn more about my friends at Done For You Real Estate right there. If you haven't checked them out, if you haven't heard of them before, I'll make this easy for you. These guys have found a way to make real estate investing straightforward, and their system flat out works. I'm using it, so I know. It allows everyday, hard-working Americans to finally own investment real estate without all the upfront risk and difficulty of doing it on your own. Look, I can't tell you really in strong enough, clear enough terms during this quick commercial how important it is you check these guys out. So how about this? If you visit doneforyoubuck.com, just go to that website. At the top of the page is a podcast interview I did with Done For You Real Estate where you can hear my experience with their company in my own words. Visit doneforyoubuck.com. listen to the podcast interview, and give my friends a chance to show you what they can do for you, from picking the city, the house, getting the broker, getting the loan, and the tenant in place. DoneForYouBuck.com. As more Americans continue to get vaccinated, it seems the end of the pandemic is at least somewhat in sight. But our next guest says not for children. In her latest piece, New York Post columnist Carol Markowicz suggests that COVID-19 hysterics may never let our children live normal lives, writing, quote, "For more than a year, they have suffered from irrational, unscientific, and downright superstitious policies inflicted upon them by adults, and there is no end in sight." Joining us now to talk about this, we've got Carol Markowicz, who writes for the New York Post editorial page. Carol, great to see you. So, masking up 2-year-olds to 4-year-olds is a thing now in Michigan, I've just seen.
Yeah.
New York City schools aren't really opening. Just give us the 30,000-foot view of how are the lockdowners still irrationally punishing children in different places across the country?
Well, in New York, kids over 2 have been wearing masks in daycare and schools and preschool the whole time as well. And this is a virus that is less dangerous to kids than the flu. And that's kind of the thing that I kind of want to keep saying to parents, because it's scary to be a parent and to think, oh, I'm not taking every precaution for my child. But you are taking every precaution. You're taking every reasonable precaution for your child just by, making them wash their hands or keeping them in any way, safe from any virus, from the flu or from anything. I think people just keep doing what they're doing. And the masking is a real problem, especially because I think that now we're having the conversation, that you and I have been having for months and months, that masking outside is completely pointless. I mean, masking inside might not be much either, but outside is entirely useless. People are finally coming around to that, but I see it developing where kids will still need to mask because they don't have the vaccine, and we need to keep them safe.
And when you say they're starting to figure out, just so you're absolutely correct, but we're not even just talking about journalists here. I mean, Fauci has already been, and he always, whatever Fauci sort of says, magically, he's over at the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease. He's at NIAID,
right.
And yet the CDC always follows the Fauci guidance. The CDC comes out, so it's at the very top level. I mean, to your point about outdoor masking, there has never been a reasonable data-based policy of outdoor masking. It's absolutely absurd, and now they're even starting to admit it. But earlier this month, you had YouTube yanking a video of Florida Governor Ron DeSantis talking to medical experts about COVID-19 and whether kids should wear masks. YouTube called this medical misinformation. I mean, I think big tech has a lot to answer. Put aside the suppression of conservatism. This is the suppression of public health information ideas that are increasingly being shown to be correct.
That's right. Yeah, that was actually really scary because a few days later, Fauci basically said the same thing. So we're having this thing happen where if it's not the right person saying it, it becomes misinformation. But Fauci, he's all over the board. That's really the biggest problem that I've had with him all along, is that he says something, then he says something else the next day, then he says back to the first thing the next day. People are confused, and it comes from Fauci himself, that confusion.
I've never seen anything like it. When I was just on a plane over a couple of planes over the weekend, and airlines with really Stalinist fervor they're more than any other place you come across. I mean, they had over the public address system, mask up in between bites, eat for a reasonable period of time with your mask down, and then pull it up. I want to meet the person. I'm really curious who's in charge of this. Like, who at Delta and JetBlue, who are the morons that are writing these scripts and recording them and blasting them over the PA and telling us to wash our hands and to mask up between bites, as if that's going to stop the disease at this point? I mean, do you ever feel like, where is the crazy coming from with these people?
Yeah. It's funny. I've been on a bunch of flights and I haven't had that experience. So I wonder if it's just like individual Stalinists who have been like tasted power and they just can't get enough. I don't even want to say it, but it was all my flights have been on United and they were sort of sane about it. I don't want to get them in trouble.
I was on
normal.
JetBlue and they were ready to send me to the masked gulag. I'm telling you, they were all in crazy on me. I've never seen anything like it. And they said over the PA, you got to mask up between bites. Who still thinks, Carol, this is where we need to be? I mean, what is this just a mass delusion? Where does this disorder come from?
Well, again, I really do blame Fauci, but I also blame the hysterical media that has not allowed any space for conversation that in any way, goes against the official line. I mean, masks outside have been stupid since day one, and we all knew it, and we all know it, and yet we continue to do it because there's societal pressure, or in places like New York, the actual law, the Cuomo directive says that if you can't avoid being within 6 feet, you have to mask up. So people, as they walk by each other on the street where the risk is zero, they're masking up, double masking, etc.
Oh, and some of them are vicious about it too. I mean, for those who aren't here, just so you know, if you're watching this in other parts of the country, they'll yell at you, they'll scream at you, pull your mask up. These people are completely out of their minds. And I can go about this all day. I'm never letting this go because this is what tyranny actually looks like. And I'm appalled at how many people, not just in the media, in the medical establishment, were total cowards, went along with this. They didn't want their little blue check MD peers to think less of them. But let's just focus in. You've been watching the school issue very closely here, and I know it's different all across the country. But again, bringing it to New York, where I am, I know you're in Florida now, but you've been following the New York school system. We're not really getting full in-school learning guaranteed at all right now, are we? Starting in the fall, I'm talking about.
No. Oh yeah, I'm actually increasingly convinced only about concerned only about the fall. Right now, New York City schools have finally started moving to 3 feet instead of 6 feet between kids, only in elementary schools, and that kicked off today. But not every school obviously is doing it, and it might be weeks and weeks before some schools implement it, and it's an ongoing thing. Now, my worry is 60% of New York City parents have opted their kids for remote learning for the rest of the year. It could be because they already have childcare that they paid for, like daycare or something like that, or they're at their, in New York City, a lot of people have summer homes, or they're staying with family, or any number of reasons why they've chosen to stay remote, or of course, a lot of people are still afraid. So what will happen when those 60% come back into the system in September, or even 40% of those, the majority of those people come back in September? We can't do 3 feet. It's just not plausible in New York City or in other cities across the country. We don't have the space. And no matter how much money the Biden administration makes rain on these schools, they're not going to be able to build new buildings and hire double the number of teachers by September. So it's an ongoing worry for me that schools will not open for full-time learning in the same, anti-science union-dominated cities as they're not open right now.
Mass hysteria, folks. That's what this has turned into. A very real, a very serious virus that then had mass hysteria thanks to mass media piled on top of it. Carol, thanks for joining us. Good to see you.
Thank you so much, Buck. Thanks.
After the break, Democratic states like New York and New Jersey losing congressional seats as residents flee to red states in record numbers. We'll take a look at the political consequences of the progressive agenda right up next in the Buck Brief. I've warned you about home title theft. That's where cyber thieves remove you from your home's title and become the owner. I said, you better get home title lock because the big one is coming. Well, if you're on Facebook, the big one's already here. Facebook had a breach, 500 million accounts exposed to cyber thieves. And according to a retired FBI cybercrime expert, everything thieves need to take over as the new owner of your home was already leaked. That's name, address, personal information. It's out there. The thief forges your signature on a quitclaim deed stating you sold your home to him. Then he'll leave you in debt or even have you evicted. Look, do what I did. Take this basic step to protect your home's title. Home Title Lock. Just go to the website HomeTitleLock.com and register your address there to see if you're already a victim. Then you can sign up for 30 free days of protection during this high-risk breach. Again, go to HomeTitleLock.com and use promo code RADIO. That's HomeTitleLock.com, promo code RADIO. They're calling them refugees, people from deep blue states like New Jersey, New York, and California who are packing up and relocating in droves to red states. According to an annual study by United Van Lines, 8 of the top 10 inbound states are reliably Republican. The results are disastrous for Democrat-run states, who in addition to losing a portion of their tax base, are also losing political influence. Today, the U.S. Census Bureau announced the congressional apportionment counts based on the 2020 census. The results were not good for Team Blue. Let's take a look at the winners and losers in tonight's Buck Brief. Oh, it was all Trump's fault, right? The pandemic, everything bad they told us was Trump's fault. And yet if you see, it's not Trump or Republican governance that people are rejecting in this country. It's actually those who move with their feet, who have to make the big decision to, in many cases, leave their jobs, their family members or members of their family behind in order to relocate somewhere else. They're moving to freer, lower tax, redder states. The data speaks for itself on this one. We now have, according to the census, the states that are gaining House seats, which is a great indicator of how all this is trending. Texas, up 2. People are moving to Texas. Florida, up 1. North Carolina, up 1. Montana, up 1. Colorado and Oregon. Now remember, Oregon actually could be, that seat could go red. The coast of Oregon, very blue. The interior of Oregon is actually somewhat red. So it's not a guarantee that will be a Democrat seat, far from it. But what is really going on here? You see, we have this system of federalism. We have the states as laboratories of our democracy and as places that can try out different policies. And the residents within those states, Americans, can say, you know what, I've had enough of this. I don't think that high crime, high taxes, high socialism, high wokeness, I don't think that's good for me or my family or my business, so I'm going to go somewhere else. Do you ever hear anybody say, I've had enough of Florida, I've had enough of Texas, send me to Los Angeles to try to open a small business there? Not really. You're not hearing a lot of that these days. Why is it? Because people actually have to live with the consequences of bad decision making, and it's particularly in the cities. You have to remember that. There are blue states, sure, but blue states are almost always anchored by a major metropolitan area that is absolutely dominated by leftists. And that's where you feel it the most. That's where the economic pain and the day-to-day worries of overregulation, quality of life deterioration, overtaxation, and crime, and all these things, that's where people feel it the most. Places like New York, Los Angeles, they're just losing people at breakneck speed. San Francisco, the Bay Area, turning into a ghost town if it keeps up like this. Why is it happening? It couldn't be any more obvious. People don't like to suffer because of the decisions pushed by virtue signaling bureaucrats, elected officials, and elites who never really have to deal with the consequences the same way that the rest of us do. It's folks who are middle class. It's folks who are trying to just pay their bills, build a little more security for themselves through hard work, grit, and determination. They're the ones who suffer when there's less civil services. They're the ones who are actually paying the price when you talk about increase in crime. It's not the guy living in the mayor's mansion. It's not the guy in the governor's mansion. No, they're going to be fine. They got armed security, and they're going to be going on CNN, and they got a book deal waiting for them. Their family's already set, probably. No. It's folks who are in the fight, trying to make the best they can for themselves and their families. They are suffering. What you have in the cities is very similar to what people have been saying has occurred in California as a state, but now this is in cities all across the country, which is you have the very rich and the dependent. You have those who don't care what the tax rate really is because they're so wealthy and so elite, so separate in their walled enclaves and their private security from everybody else. And then you have those who live off the largesse of the state largely. That's how their needs are met economically. and the biggest welfare states, the most generous welfare states exist in these Democrat blue-dominated cities. So for people who don't really want to be dealing with this, paying for this, it's just an obvious choice to make. And that's why, in so many ways, Florida and other states, but they're always redder, less regulation, more Republican states are getting people who are saying enough is enough. Remember, not everyone can move. Not everyone can leave their job. People have family members they have to take care of. They have jobs that require them to be in person. They have economic constraints. Perhaps they're underwater on their mortgage in their house. Maybe because property values have been going down, in part because of the crappy governance and the super high taxation in these Democrat states. But those who can leave are moving overwhelmingly to places like Florida, North Carolina, Texas, Montana. Colorado's a purple state, but it's gotten a little bit blue, in part because of the flight from California. New York, I mentioned New York. I'm sorry, states that are losing House seats. I wanted to show you this. New York down 1, California down 1, Michigan, Illinois, Pennsylvania, Ohio, West Virginia also down. That's probably from economic stagnation in those states, but I'm sure we could do a deep dive into what exactly is pushing those numbers down. But New York, California, Michigan, Illinois, the big blue states, the biggest and the bluest, losing a congressional House seat because people don't want to live there as much. And it's because Democrats are in charge. All right. A state of emergency is in effect in Elizabeth City, North Carolina, as local officials fear violence in the wake of the police-involved shooting of Andrew Brown Jr. We got the chairman of the Texas GOP, Allen West, joining us next to give his perspective on the latest shooting and the mounting pressure on U.S. law enforcement. A North Carolina city declared a state of emergency this morning amid concerns that body cam video showing the police killing of a black man could cause civil unrest when it's released to the public. Protests have been building in Elizabeth City after 42-year-old Andrew Brown was fatally shot by officers last Wednesday. Sheriff telling the public to wait for the facts.
We know people want answers. We know you're angry. We understand and respect that. But we're following a process that protects the investigation to ensure fairness for all.
Here to react to the escalating tensions between law enforcement and some members of the public, Chairman of the Texas GOP, Allen West, also Army veteran. Chairman West, good to see you.
It's good to be with you, Buck. Thanks for having me.
It seems to me that we've seen a change recently in what expectations should be. That it used to be we would ask people to wait for the facts after a police-involved shooting, but from what we're seeing, whether it's the Ma'Khia Bryant shooting and others as well, sometimes it seems, Chairman West, like the facts don't matter to the anti-police left. What do you think's going on here?
Well, the facts don't matter. If you go all the way back to the incident that happened in Cambridge, Massachusetts, when President Barack Obama came out and declared that the police acted stupidly without having any of the facts of the issue. And that started us on this trend, a trend that we saw in Ferguson, Missouri, hands up, don't shoot, but that was not the case. And it just continues on. The left has a narrative that they want to proliferate and promulgate across the United States of America. And this narrative is that if you are black, the police are racist and they're out there hunting you down and killing you. And we know that's not the case. And it's just going to continue to get even worse until we start to call out the hypocrisy of the left. I'd like to know how many shootings and killings there were in Chicago, Detroit, Atlanta, any of the major urban population centers this past weekend where we know that it is the Democrats who are in control of these population centers. But yet we don't hear people such as Black Lives Matter or any of these other Marxist groups addressing that issue.
It seemed that the Ma'Khia Bryant shooting last week, which was shown it's a broad daylight shooting with a police officer. It's up close. The camera shows really very clearly, the body cam on the officer shows very clearly what happened here. You have somebody who posed an imminent threat to lethal harm to somebody else, and law enforcement used lethal force in defense of another life. And yet the same machinery of BLM activism and outrage against police went into effect. What does that tell us about what the group is really trying to get accomplished?
Well, what they're trying to get accomplished is a new form of Marxism. It's not about class warfare and divisiveness. It's about racial warfare and divisiveness. And when you think about this title, Black Lives Matter, the most important thing we should ask them is which Black Lives matter? Because the only lives in the Black community that matter to them are those that they can leverage for this political, leftist, ideological agenda and narrative, and that's what we continue to see. And so when you have a young Black woman who is about to stab to death another Black woman, that's a lethal situation. The police officer has to make a point decision, a second-to-second decision, and he made the decision to protect a life. But now all of a sudden it seems that he wants to be demonized. And think about what LeBron James posted out there on Twitter. If we're going to use the same standard that we use to impeach President Trump, well, LeBron James should be kicked out of the NBA.
You know, you mentioned before the consequences of some of these decisions that are going on now. We're seeing it across the country on the law enforcement side as well as in the crime statistics. But when it comes to our uniformed law enforcement personnel, you just look at major departments across the country and you're seeing big increases. In the NYPD, for example, a 75% increase in departures and retirement. So people who either have left or have notified that they are about to go and leave for good on retirement. That's playing out in cities all over the place, Chairman West. And how is this supposed to get better? I mean, what are the Biden administration, what do they think this is going to do when we have the highest homicide rate this country's seen, the highest spike in homicides in over 20 years?
You're absolutely right. And think about the insidious actions that are going on when we have district attorneys that are out releasing violent criminals. Here in Dallas and Dallas County, we have a district attorney by the name of John Creuzot, who was aided and abetted into getting into position by George Soros, and he has been releasing these violent criminals. And so the police here on the Dallas police force are, why do we even try? Why are we arresting these people and locking them up? Because he's releasing them. You were just recently down in Austin, Texas, a city run by the progressive socialist left that has defunded their police force by millions of dollars. Well, guess what you have seen happen? A 63 to 64% increase in violent crime. So if we're going to continue down this path of not wanting the police on the streets, the people that are going to be most adversely affected are the minority communities, where you see in these major urban population centers, there's restrictive gun measures and gun control measures. The gangs are running the streets. They don't care about legal, law-abiding firearm owning. And then you want to take away the police. It's just a system of chaos. And then who takes over the streets? Well, of course, it's the BLM, Antifa, progressive socialist leftists, much the same as we saw in early 1930s Germany with Hitler and the brown shirts, the SA.
You mentioned my time in Austin. It's absolutely true. I actually went to the city council, met with the only Republican member of the Austin City Council, and she walked me through what's going on in the state capital of Texas, where you are the GOP chairman. And she just said that the things that they're seeing there would normally indicate a wrong direction for public safety, for law enforcement operations, but the progressive socialist left views it as just a beginning. And I think that's what the public is waking up to now nationwide, that what we used to believe, which is, okay, crime's going up, clearly something's wrong, we need better law enforcement, meaning more cops, more resources, that they don't view it that way anymore. I mean, I think there's a real departure here, Alan.
No, you're absolutely right. What we are dealing with are people that are delusional, deranged, and also quite dangerous. But yet the tenacity that they show in going out and fighting for that which they believe in, which is completely wrong and detrimental to safety and security for your everyday law-abiding citizens, this is something that people are waking up to, and I think it's going to make a huge difference. Another thing that we're seeing, of course, is an uncontrolled border situation here in the state of Texas. And when you talk about defunding police, you talk about not wanting to have ICE on the streets, then you are seeing everyday citizens being terrorized by the cartels, which is really a terrorist organization, and these other aspects of illegal immigration.
Yes, the Justice Department is opening investigation into Louisville police departments. Now we've got federal oversight, looking over the shoulder here of police departments. What are your expectations for how this is going to go under the Biden DOJ?
I think the expectation is exactly what we think. They're more so concerned about that leftist narrative and agenda, but it won't be long. 2022 will be here, and I think that the United States of America will have a course correction because we have told people these are who these people are and what they believe in, and now everyone has seen it.
Chairman West, appreciate your insight, sir. Good to see you.
Always a pleasure, Buck.
Can COVID-19 be transmitted over a Zoom call? Someone in the White House seems to think so. We have that story and more coming up in Quick Hits. We're living in very uncertain times, and being prepared for the unknown is more important than ever. I mean, I'm sure you've already noticed the world we live in is far from predictable. You've got the government passing massive spending bills, Federal Reserve's printing trillions of dollars in fiat currency, and many experts are predicting inflation could run rampant in the coming months. And that could spell disaster for the dollars in your bank account right now. We could all benefit from something a little more reliable right about now. Well, what could be more reliable than real gold and silver? I'm talking about real gold and silver you can actually hold right in your hands. Call the Oxford Gold Group right now. Learn how easy it is to get real gold and silver sent securely directly to your home, or how you can have real gold and silver placed in your IRA or 401k. Just call the Oxford Gold Group at 833-600-GOLD and ask for your free guide on owning gold and silver. Again, call the Oxford Gold Group right now, 833-600-GOLD. The Oxford Gold Group is the only gold company I trust. Call them right now, 833-600-GOLD. President Biden masks up, gotta avoid the Zoom flu with world leaders not doing the same thing. And you got kids crossing the border getting a greeting from Kamala Harris, but not in person, of course. Those stories first up on Quick Hits. Let's get to it. So they're having a climate meeting because climate change is religion for people who think they're too smart for religion. And they got all these world leaders all talking about how they're going to really do a lot to tackle climate change. Yeah, sure they are. But put that aside for a second. You got Putin in the middle here. You see him, no mask. You got Merkel, you got, I think, Boris Johnson, so I can't really see, but you got a bunch of world leaders there. You've got Angela Merkel, you've got others. No masks on anybody. Oh, wait, but on the top right, one down, there's Joe Biden with his mask on for the Zoom call. Because, oh yeah, that's right, this isn't political, folks. A mask isn't like the left-wing version of a MAGA hat. No, of course not. Joe Biden just wants to make sure that until we have clear scientific proof that COVID cannot shoot through your computer screen from someone somehow and magically infect you, he wants to be safe. Joe Biden takes the virus seriously, even when he's alone staring at a screen and no human being with two brain cells to rub together actually thinks there's any risk of getting COVID. But Joe Biden's here anyway, setting an example of what hysteria, stupidity, virtue signaling, and mechanisms of control look like when they take over a society. Kind of a terrifying thing really when you think about it. But that's right, good old Scranton Joe, masked up for the Zoom call. You know that Joe is probably a guy who would mask. Oh, actually, no, he probably doesn't mask in his car alone because nobody would see that. And the whole point is to show his supporters, yeah, here I am, I wear a mask. Sure he does. And then there's Kamala Harris. She's the border. Oh, let's do a little quick scoreboard analysis. How many times has yours truly, little old me, just little old Buckster, been down to the border in the last 3 months? How many times Kamala? Oh, 0 for Kamala. And she's the border czar and has effectively whatever resources she wants to get there. She could say, I want to get to the border tomorrow. In 2 hours, she could say, well, maybe 3 hours. But I want to be at the border, and there she'd be, and that's that, and they won't go. Why won't she go? Well, she's doing the next best thing. Kids at the border are being welcomed by, according to the New York Post here, welcomed with copies of Kamala Harris's book. Yeah, that's right. We have, you see, when we have illegal crossing migrant children, they're terrified. I saw them when I was down there. They are terrified. It's a very sad situation. They do need immediate care and support. Some of them have been abused very severely by cartels and other nefarious individuals during their journey. It's a very serious thing. What does Kamala want to make sure that they have, though? propaganda about how great Kamala is. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. Who thought this was a good idea? Who really is making the determination that, you know what the children really need? A Kamala Harris children's book. That's what this is. Superheroes are everywhere is the title of it. But you know where Kamala Harris isn't? The border. So I guess superheroes aren't everywhere, folks. I guess that's not true. Twitter claims to be a free speech platform. It's not. We all know that, right? But Twitter claims to be one, and one of the ways that we see that's not the case is that for foreign governments, they will actually censor information. They will censor criticism. India, as we discussed earlier in the program, is going through a terrible surge of COVID cases, hospitalizations, and deaths right now. Despite months ago, we were told, oh, they all masked up and they were fine because they all masked. India is having this terrible problem. On Saturday, Twitter complied with the Indian government's request. This is what I wanted to show you here, and prevented people in India from viewing more than 50 tweets that appeared to criticize the administration's handling of the pandemic. Targeted posts include tweets from opposition ministers critical of Modi, journalists, and ordinary Indian citizens. Folks, these big tech companies are handmaidens of power and tyranny. They just don't care about the fact that they're supposed to be. They were founded on principles of free expression. People bought into them and trusted them and shared their information and used them because Silicon Valley had an explicit, in the early days, bargain with us. Remember Google, don't be evil? They dropped that one. I wonder why. I know they've decided that they do whatever is in their immediate interest to do. It's disgraceful, and that even includes censoring criticism of a government at the request of the government that's being criticized. Kind of like in this country with Joe Biden, right? Say anything about the Fauciites being a bunch of morons, they lock you out of your Facebook account. Say something about, I was fact-checked. Facebook took action against me because I said wearing masks outdoors is dumb. Do you think they're ever going to send me a sorry? Do you think they're going to send me a retraction now that Fauci goes, it's minimal. It's a minimal risk. We don't really need to wear masks. Oh, okay. Yeah, we all know we shouldn't really have to wear masks. But, well, I shouldn't say we all know. Anyone with a brain who reads and thinks for themselves already knows that. But not the Fauciites. You know what the great thing about the Oscars is? I haven't even said the word Oscars until now. Happened yesterday. Didn't see a second of it. Now, usually conservatives, and especially in the media, and I might have even been guilty of this myself in the past. Usually, because there you go. There's the scene. Oh, yeah. Usually conservatives say, oh, I didn't watch a second of the Oscars. And then they go and they talk for 10 minutes about the Oscars and what movies they liked and didn't like and what won and didn't win. And I have no idea what won and didn't win awards. I have no idea what was nominated. I didn't see any of these movies. I could care less. And I'm not telling you, this is not some humble brag thing or whatever. I'm not the only one. That's the good news. Finally, we don't care about these Hollywood jerks anymore. When I say we, I mean normal Americans. They're starting to realize we don't need them. We don't need them. They're making crap content anyway. It's all woke garbage. They don't make movies that people want to see. They don't make movies that entertain people. They're just all making movies for each other to look woke and a virtue signal. That's why, if you want content that's actually for the masses, you've got to go to the big streaming services. And even then, there's a lot of woke politics, but at least they make some stuff you want to see. The ratings, 2019. 29 million people watched the Oscars. A lot of people. 2020, 23 million. 2021, 9.8 million people. Way down. Thank the Lord. That's what I like to see. You know what the Oscars viewership should be? 0. We got a lot of work to do, folks. It's garbage. They've betrayed American society and civilization by turning against all that we hold in common and hold dear with all their woke absurdity, and I'm tired of it. All right, that's it for tonight's Hold the Line. The No Spin News with Bill O'Reilly is up next. Shields high.